Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Stan. I'm coming to you from the town of Gainesville, Florida.
And this is Brackly, coming to you from Las Vegas, Nevada.
And this is Ellen, coming to you from the beautiful island of St. Bart's. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk. And we are the Lumen Brothers and sister.
Hey, where's David?
Oh, where is David? Well, it says here that he's wandering around the world and having a good time and will be home soon and joining us.
I think he's actually floating.
Floating around the world.
I think he's got his Margaritta to go machine going, and he's got his lobster cooking, and he's got his best girl with him. And I think David is living the life right now.
I think it's great.
I don't know if he'll ever come home.
Are they on a cruise ship?
Yeah, it's a cruise ship.
Wow.
Hopefully it's better than that cruise ship off of South Carolina last week.
Yeah, really.
Well, welcome to episode 323. And it looks like Stan has our first question today.
This is our friend, what's his name? He's in Oregon. Is it Jonathan? And he says he's considering joining a union. And he says, can you tell me the pros and cons of unions? Wow, that's a deep one. Speaking as the son of a Teamster, who, my dad was kind of close to, what was that guy's name that they buried in the Meadowlands?
Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was the president of his union in New York. So, I think there's a history, pro and con, about unions. Certainly once upon a time, 100 years ago, management really exploited workers. And to the point where workers it was really unethical. And so workers got together and they banded together to negotiate collectively, which is what a union is, rather than you negotiating with your boss independently. You form a union or a group, a collective of people who have solidarity, and you elect people to lead you, and that one person or a group of people negotiate with management to get you good wages, good benefits, and so on. And I think unions also, what came with that, the benefit to management, was that unions participated in training people and keeping people up to date and sort of credentialing people that they were really high quality. And so that's sort of the upside in a sense. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a management person at Honda America. And I asked him his opinion of unions. And he said, we loved unions because we could negotiate with one group of people and we could get a deal. And in the years where we were making a lot of money, we could be very generous to the workers. And in the years where we were struggling, the union would make concessions. And it was a very good, healthy relationship. Unfortunately, that sort of ethic has seemed changed. There's negative sides where unions can use their leverage to really drive up ticket prices or cause things to be more expensive than necessary. Those relationships could become adversarial. So I think it depends. On the time in history. I think right now unions are sort of strengthening themselves. I live in a state that's very anti-union, unfortunately. In other words, unions are cast by politicians and management as the enemy of getting things done. So I don't know. I've had a good experience with the United Scenic Artists over the years. My dad, I think was a pro-union person. But at the same time, his union where he worked was pretty corrupt. And so there's there's a long and sordid story there. So I can't really say, one way or the other, but I'm giving you some pros. There's pros to collective bargaining. There's pros to the efficiency of that. There's cons to, like anything else, organizations can become corrupted and behave in unethical ways. And management can also try and hold out and not give people what they need. So you need someone to advocate for you. So I think ultimately, if you have the opportunity to join a union and it's a good union and you're a good worker and your union is healthy and working collaboratively with management, I would say join it.
On Facebook, there are a lot of groups, stagehand groups, and, all kinds of people looking for work and posting work. And a lot of times it all circles back to the local IA in the city. And they do seem to hold, a lot of the jobs or have access to a lot of the work. So I think in the terms of, of IA and the 829, it's good for the designers and the stagehands to be part of the union in terms of getting work and bargaining. I think a lot of people still have a manager that negotiates their contract. I don't think the union replaces that. But as we're going to talk about later, with the Hollywood writers' strike and the impact that's having on a lot of things, I think that, it can be a very fragile situation sometimes.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because some unions, or like Actors Equity, if you become a member of the union, then you really can't act in any other non-union show. Whereas USA and the stagehand union, you can certainly work jobs that are not union. So it's more flexibility, I guess.
Well, Equity does give you, like if you have a community theater and you want to volunteer or take a really low paid job, they give you a waiver. It's like, and then there's an asterisk next to your name that says, Brackly Freyer is an Equity actor.
Yes, but I mean, it's a little easier, I think, if not with not.
Right.
And also, if you're a freelance lighting designer and you need a medical, you need health care, that's one great because unions provide health care, which is good.
Yes, absolutely. And, the on Broadway, the general managers and the press agents belong to ATPAM, which is part of IATSE. And one of the real advantages there is the retirement and healthcare as well. Yeah, I'd say join unless it becomes a problem. Stay in the union.
Well, I think another pro to that is career development. And so we can think about that in regards to, big lord houses and Broadway houses too. Whether it's right or wrong, that's up for debate. But I haven't seen a university design teaching position in the last few years that hasn't said USA 829 preferred. So I think what happens is there's certainly talented people who are not in the union, but I think that union stamp of approval and your membership also puts some people's mind at ease, that they know there is a foundational skill set that they are getting with that membership.
I want to respond to the kind of the concept there. So what Steve is saying can absolutely be true, that if you have let's call this, if you will, just go with me for a minute. You could have a society of people who are experts in a particular field, and they could sort of create their own set of credentialing. And so let's just take it out of lighting for a moment and say the American Society of Acoustical Consultants, there is such a thing. And you can get into that society. And all those people do review your work. They definitely do support each other and they share knowledge and so on. And then if you're a member of that, there sort of says something about your peers have accepted you. It's sort of like tenure, right? So there is a positive to that. That's the pro. Agree with Steve. There's also a negative to that. And the negative is they can turn into, either unsuspectingly or organically grow into organizations or societies or clubs, if you will, that are gatekeeping organizations, which then, because what happens is people get in, that credential then brings them work and recognition. The truth of the matter is there's only so much work out there, or there's only so much good work, I put in quotes, out there. And then those people, it's just the natural survival of the fittest, want to keep it to themselves. And if you let too many people in, well, what happens to us? Is there enough work? And I've had that experience both in a variety of fields where, one, it was a good credential to get, and I felt like I was getting validated, like Steve says, by my colleagues. I'm good enough. They see my work and they think I'm good enough. So there's that stamp of approval. On the other side of it, I've had the opposite experience where an organization basically was essentially prejudiced against me for reasons I won't go into, and used their power to gatekeep, to block me from being part of their organization. So I think there are pros and cons, all of which are valid. So you've got to sort of weigh it. And then I'll just finish off with this. Sometimes the Woody Allen quote is appropriate. Sometimes I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would let me in.
Isn't that Groucho Marx?
Yeah, it's a Woody Allen quote. Something like, wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would actually let me in. But essentially you have to sort of say, is the club a club you really want to be a member of? And how do they behave? And I think that fluctuates. I think at one time USA was that. Once upon a time, it was quite the gatekeeping organization.
I'm really sorry, folks, but that is A Groucho Marx quote. I refuse to join any club that would have me as a member. Groucho Marx.
There we go.
Woody Allen may have stolen it, but he stole it from Groucho Marx.
Right. For the record.
Groucho Marx? Oh, you're right. It was Groucho Marx.
For the record, Groucho Marx.
Groucho Marx. So I stand corrected. Although not a lot of light between those two.
Charles from Los Angeles asks, what are the common causes of lighting systems failure, and how can you disaster-proof your system?
Yeah, so you know what? I have a story with this. So we had a production running this spring. We have a fairly reasonable, robust system at the university. We have a system, we're up. We got maybe 12, 15 movers in it, a bunch of fixtures. We got all kinds of stuff, right? And we got this thing going on. So moving lights, sitting in a queue, nothing's being pushed, no buttons, no nothing. All of a sudden, some of them just blink bright and then back to their level. Sometimes they just swing out of position for a second and then swing back. People are pulling their hair out of their heads, okay? The crew does everything. They check the cable. They do the DMS continuity. They're just running rampant, troubleshooting every which way they know. And I have an electrician who's got 30 years of experience. We got smart grad students. Nobody can figure this out. So we call up our local ETC folks down in Orlando. They come up, they send the tech. He goes, I don't know. I can't find it. I think it's one of the fixtures. Well, okay. Seems to me, in my experience, that's rare, that it would be one of the fixtures. So we take the fixtures that have been doing the misbehaving and we put them on their own DMX string. Just 3 fixtures on their own string DMX, okay? Still happens. I use the social media, the ETC group, everything on Facebook, talk to people, everybody I know. I don't know. So, sometimes you got fixture A, B, and C, and fixture B is misbehaving, but it's actually fixture C or fixture A that's causing the problem. You don't know. So, okay, we get through the show. We can't fix it. They blink, they move. We just push through it. Show is over. Bring the 3 fixtures into my office where I'm running a widget and a Nomad. We shut the show file up. We put the lights up. Patch them in, everything's good. I put the camera on my computer, start the video recording. We watch it for a day and a half, 2 days. Nothing. No change, no lights move, no blink. Can't figure it out. So we still don't know. So we think it's in the network, maybe. So so I don't know how you bulletproof it, right? Maybe, it's technology. I mean, a chip in a fixture can be bad. We have not nailed down the cause of that problem. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. But if you guys know how to make your system disaster proof, please tell me.
Well, if is loss of power a concern, like the common failures, seems to me that loss of power is often a concern.
That's easy to figure out, though. Power is, if you don't have juice, I mean, that's easy to troubleshoot down that line.
Right, but if you're in the middle of a show, do you want everything on some sort of backup system, or do you do redundancy, or what happens if the console goes, or?
Yeah, so I remember back in the old days at the Joyce, Steve probably remembers this. Jules Fisher had a Strand light palette put into the Joyce, but he had 2. So in the booth at the Joyce, they were literally 2 light palettes operating at the same time, and if one failed, the other one automatically took over because they had a failure.
Most of the shows here in Las Vegas have a backup.
I have a question about your moving lights. So you put them in your office and everything worked fine for a day and a half, and so you guys were amazed about that.
Well, maybe more than a day and a half, but okay.
A week.
Yeah.
And no problems.
Yeah.
Did you put them back in the theater in the same conditions, and did they fail again?
That's a great question. That could not be duplicated because we've moved on to the next show, and that show is struck. That would be a very good method, right? And we have to set up exactly the same conditions, and we have operationally that's not feasible, unfortunately.
Because it could be something as simple as the cables you were using in your office were not the same kind of cable. There was something wrong with the cables that were in the theater.
Well, during the production, the cable troubleshoot was extensive. I mean, they swapped everything out. It could be something as stupid. Here's the kinds of things that I've run into. So when you plug an Ethernet cable into its socket, okay, there are like 16 little pins. Okay, and what I've learned is, because of my network at home, when you unplug and replug a network cable, an Ethernet cable, those little pins, the tension on them gets weaker every time. So you want to minimize the amount of time you unplug and replug an Ethernet cable. And we're doing that a lot with our network systems, right? So, and sometimes one little pin just doesn't have enough tension. I just had to change out my my little Ethernet switch in the house, right? What's wrong with it? It was on. I'm troubleshooting with everybody, cannot figure it out. And then finally, even after unplugging it and replugging it, would power back up. And then one day, while I'm on the phone with the technician, I unplug it and replug it, and it won't power back up. I opened it up, and you know what it was? One capacitor, you could just see it melted inside. The capacitor was just like tin foil wrapped in a circle, right? It's sitting in, and it just gave way. So buy a new switch, I'm up and running and happy. So these are things that you just cannot, you just buy the best components you can.
I'll date myself. We didn't have this problem in the auto transformer days, just saying.
No, that's right, because we were not relied on electronics.
No, but you had them in the resistance
Oh,
days.
you mean the Thyratron dimmers, yes.
And you were running around with a heater, plugging it into the line to make sure your Leco would dim.
Not quite that, but I understand. Well, you are listening to Light Talk, and Light Talk is sponsored by
Better Than Nothing Industries. Do you need to dress some cables? Maybe repair a spot on the dance floor? Got some masking that's ripped? Whoops! Not only are you out of real gaffer's tape, you don't even have any of the cheap grocery store stuff. What to do, kittens? Well now, just reach for Better Than Nothing gaffer tape. So what if it doesn't work? So what if it won't even stick to itself? At only $8.95 a case? Well, heck, it's gotta be better than nothing. But wait, do you find yourself at load-in asking, where is my gaffer's tape? Then you need the Gaffa No-Go. The Gaffa No-Go is an 8-foot training leash for your roll of tape. Just clip the No-Go device on your work belt. That's right. Every time your tape starts to wander off, if you know what I mean, a quick pull and Gaffa No-Go brings it right back. If you like that, then you're going to love the Octopus, our 8-arm version of the No-Go. Just hook it up to your load-in crew and they will follow you around all day like a pack of hungry hound dogs. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
That's great. And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sounds of those lovable hipster monkeys bouncing around the coffee shop means it's time for Let's Talk About. And today, let's talk about the writer's strike and the fallout.
Yeah, it's interesting because speaking of unions, the Writers Guild, which is what's on strike in Hollywood, represents over 11,000 writers of film, television, and other entertainment. And they've been on strike since May 2nd, which is a month already, primarily over royalties from streaming media. Now, there's been some fallout onto Broadway because while the Guild doesn't represent Broadway writers, it does represent writers who work on things such as the Tonys. So at one point, they were going to strike the Tonys telecast because it was going to have a script, which apparently they've gone back on and said, okay, you can do the Tonys, but no script. And they've asked their members, if nominated or getting an award, to not accept or attend. So that's interesting. So it hits more than just the Hollywood writers.
Boy, that would be hard, wouldn't it? To be nominated and given a Tony for your writing and not to accept. That would be a hard choice. You know, I saw something in the news today that Kim Kardashian had crossed a writer's picket line. And it was interesting because if I read the article correctly, about half the people there were mad at her, and about the other half of the people said, cut her some slack. Her union's not on strike. So what do you guys think about Kim Kardashian crossing the writer's strike line? I mean, clearly she's not a writer. And then on a bigger scale, would you ever cross a picket line?
I don't think I would ever cross a picket line if my own union was striking. But I would support other unions. But I don't know if I'd cross the line. That's just me.
If the actor or actress is getting paid to be in a show and they are picketing, but as Brackly said, her union is not picketing, and she wants to get paid, I suppose she has to cross the other union's picket line. But why are scripted shows filming if their union is striking? It's a little confusing to me.
Yeah, I don't know what is she doing?
Well, she's doing a show called American Horror Story, which is filming, but I'm not sure
they have
why.
writers.
Yeah, they have writers. So it says American Horror Story creator Ryan Murphy has shown his support for the striking writers by contributing to a $1.7 million relief fund.
So what is she crossing the picket line to do?
She's acting.
Yeah, but if they've stopped production.
Ellen, you might know, or Stan, when is the next big union negotiation?
Well, June 30th.
Isn't this coming?
It's for SAG.
Yeah, this is coming to head on the 30th.
Yeah.
Yes,
so they
SAG.
say that because working actors are required to act through June 30th, which means she is not scabbing. So she really was not.
It's another union.
Right. She was not crossing her own union's picket line, which is scabbing. But the question is, why is this show filming if that has a script? But that's a good question.
Who knows? Maybe she was doing some vocal track work.
I don't know. How long do you guys think this is going to last?
Well, it's hard to tell, but if they go until the end of June and the SAG actors join them, it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
They're bound to go until SAG makes a decision. It's only 4 weeks away. Why would you? I mean, that's going to be a huge bargaining chip if SAG joins them.
Right. And, we were talking about unions before, and there's another to-do brewing on Broadway, which is with the musicians union. There's a show called Here Lies Love, which was composed by David Byrne and has been produced in several places already, including a successful run at the Public Theater in New York. And it has sort of a disco, karaoke, pre-recorded track. And now it's going to a theater on Broadway that calls for 19 paid musicians for a musical. And they say, well, this musical doesn't hire musicians. It only has a pre-recorded track. That's the way it was written. And the musicians union is not happy. So Local 802, the American Federations of Musicians. And they say that, this is Broadway has always had live musicians and you can't do a Broadway musical without them. So that'll be an interesting negotiation.
It seems to me that would be a hard one to substantiate, to say that your creativity of using some tool, in which case some recorded music in a creative act, is not going to be allowed because of a union restriction. I don't think that's going to hold up. I can see how, it's going to be interesting, like you say, to see how it turns out. But I don't. In the article, did they say that it's using no musicians at all, or it's just they don't want they want to block it from using any
no musicians? They've had no musicians.
It's all track.
Yeah, it's all track. But there have been previous cases where people have paid the musicians to be there and not play.
Exactly.
So but paying 19 salaries to not play is a lot.
Yeah, doesn't that seem ridiculous, though, doesn't it?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the writers' strike.
That's a situation where I think where unions go too far. It's like they're not doing that. If they would do, okay, so it seems to me if they were doing that on the production to avoid the use of the musicians, that's one thing. But if they're doing these tracks because it's karaoke and it's inherent in the creative work of the piece that it's recorded music, that's different. So I think intent matters. If the intention is to avoid paying musicians by using a recorded stuff, then I think the union has a case. But I think if creatively that's just sort of what they're doing, because that's the creative impetus for the production or the style, that's something else.
Right, and that production has been done 3 or 4 times already with all recorded tracks. So it's not like they had live musicians off Broadway and don't want to have them on Broadway.
Right, it's sort of baked. If it's baked into the creative product, then I think the union has a hard time. If it's intended to cut out using live musicians by substituting a recorded stuff, then I think the union has a case.
On the other hand, I think does the theater has an agreement with the union that when there's a show in there, they use X number of musicians. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that pans out, right? And is the writer's strike, isn't that really about wages for streaming? Isn't that really at the core of the disagreement?
It is, because the world is changing, and
I think the writers probably have a fair point that if their work is being reproduced in other forms than traditional, they should be appropriately compensated. I think that's an evolution of the craft, and they need to be. Yeah, I think that those agreements probably need to be updated.
It's like on Facebook sometimes you're watching like a clip from a musical, and all of a sudden there's no music. And it says this has been muted for copyright rules.
Right. And when I was at LDI, I forget what lighting company was doing a light show, and I recorded it, and I thought this is really cool. And I Facebook Lived it so that I thought my students would enjoy seeing it. But then it was taken down because the system recognized the copyrighted music. And I understand that. I can see that.
But like Tina Turner passed away, right? And there have probably been 5,000 or 5 million copies of her songs played, in tributes and shows and stuff to her on Facebook and other social media since then. And how do they control all that? Most of those seem to be.
Well, for example, I have Apple Music, so I put on some Tina because I was sad about her death and her amazing talent. And so I'm listening to her, but I'm paying money every month to Apple Music, and they know exactly what I listen to, and they're paying those royalties as they should.
Right. But I've just been listening to it via other people's posts on Facebook.
Right. Well, Facebook could do the same thing. Well, this is where the new technology comes in. With the new technologies, to the data crunching that's going to be possible to actually, keep track of all this is going to become ubiquitous and very common. Mm-hmm. And then people can get their appropriate compensation. But there is a big question about authorship, as things get, and then, the question is we get into the whole conversation about authorship and artificial intelligence and all those tools. It's a whole nother can of worms.
Another can of worms are the unions in general. And it might be interesting to have somebody from 829 as a guest 1 week. Because I figure Broadway economics are fragile, and all the unions, every time there's a negotiation, they want more money. But Broadway can't add performances, can't add seats, and ticket prices are already very high. So where's the wiggle room?
Well, they're going to start streaming, and I think that what's going to be wonderful, I hope, I'm being optimistic, that bringing theatricality. Let's just be honest. The theater is very elitist. It has a very small share of the market in the United States in entertainment. And so when you can take a Broadway production or a great piece of theater and you can put it on a screen and maintain the theatricality of it, the economics, the order of magnitude of economic change, both for reaching a broader audience, which I think is fantastic for theater, and also then having a completely different revenue stream, more akin to television or film, that's going to be really good for the theater if we can make it work. And I think people are doing that and are trying to make it work. I mean, the Hamilton work was an example. Some of the Disney stuff is an example. Some of the Superstar that was done on NBC was another example. So I think people who do the work, the creatives, have to be appropriately compensated.
Interesting conversation for the future.
And I'd say I would love to be watching some Broadway shows from my living room on my system.
Well, you can. There's a Broadway HD site that you can pay for.
Yeah, there are a number of things on that that you can
Yeah,
watch.
well, there you go. There you go.
Hang on. I want to take the working man's point of view here for a second. I don't know if I agree with this. I was reading a couple years ago that the 41 Broadway houses bring in a larger revenue than the Knicks, the Rangers, the Jets, and the Giants combined. I don't know that Broadway is withering on the vine here. Now, I understand they don't want to share the profits that much, but that's a different issue. But I don't know. I mean, COVID hit them, and we need to take COVID off the table here for a second. I think they're making money, so I don't think they're at the point where we have to worry about if they're paying someone a little bit too much. Well,
that's on the income side. That's on the income side, but what's going on the outcome side? The cost of a football game, right? I don't know what they pay players. And when you have the income and you have the revenue and you have the expense side of the ledger. So I don't know where it crunches out. It's hard for me to believe that Broadway is actually generating, after all expenses are paid, generating greater profit than all those sporting entities. I don't know. I'd like to see that.
Well,
data.
Are you talking about gross or are you talking about profit?
Right, exactly.
I assume the article is talking about gross.
Yeah, but don't forget the sports events have massive television advertising revenue on top of their ticket prices.
Take a look at Caw. If you believe the producers of Caw, they will tell you that to stage Caw in Las Vegas, their budget to put that show in that theater was greater than all 41 Broadway houses together for the shows they produced.
Well, that may well be because they totally redid the theater and they built an incredibly high-tech stage in there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, how many performances does Broadway do? I mean, if I look at Cirque says they do, depending on the show, between 380 and 470 performances a year.
Well, a Broadway show does 8 a week times 52 weeks.
Okay, so I have a friend who is the vice president of the John Gore Group, which is he's a producer of Hamilton. Okay. And I had a conversation with him and he said, look, we don't make money on the shows. We lose money. We don't make money on Hamilton. We lose money. What we make money on is the merchandise. The merchandise.
But it's still money. It's still profit.
Absolutely.
So
but
when
it's not on the box office. The point is,
yes, but when they're saying, Mr. Stagehand, we're going to pay you $1 as opposed to $1.25, I don't think they're hurting. I don't think Broadway's hurting anytime. I mean, otherwise, people like Disney would pull out of it. They're not doing it for the tax loss.
Well, there's sort of like ripple effects. You know, you create a character, you create a movie, then you create a show. It's like, how do you capitalize on the success? And, I mean, I think it's multifaceted.
It's all about the money.
I just think that it's not show art, it's show business, right? Reaching a broader audience for traditional theater work, I think, is a good thing. And if streaming gets it there, I'm all for it.
Right, because they say that 1 out of 5 Broadway shows recoups its money. That means breaks even. So if they can break even via more streaming, that's great. But as we go back to the writer's strike, which was the original topic here, they're going to want to get paid for that streaming. The actors, the stagehands, the general managers, the press agents, everyone.
They should.
Yep.
Well, I can use my little show that I invested in as an example. We invested in this little thing. We thought we were going to lose the money. We were prepared to lose the money. You know, it surprised us. It actually was a success. It ran off, and then it ran off Broadway for 2 years. I'm getting all these financial statements, and it's like, everybody's getting paid. Everybody was getting paid. The actors, the producers, the managers, the Shubits, the theater, the rent, the insurance, the publicist. Everybody's getting paid to produce, the executive producers, except for me, the angel investor. Okay, then the show closed. I still hadn't recouped. Now, after 7 years, okay, and the show was very popular in high schools, and it was popular because people didn't want to do risky stuff, so this was a safe show. You know, now I have recouped 80% of my original capital, 80%. Now, next year, maybe I get another 20%, then I would be flat. And that's how long it's up. But I have royalty rights in perpetuity. So my grandchildren will still get a little check every time that show has a good year.
You clearly have invested in the wrong show.
Yes,
I mean,
I've invested.
have you looked at Taylor Swift's latest concert? Taylor Swift, the top ticket, playing stadiums around the country, the top ticket is $2,400, and the bottom ticket, the crappy seats, $1,400.
Well, you can't invest in her.
Well, she has a whole merchandise thing. You talk about merchandise. Right.
No, but as an individual investor, you can't do that, right? Unless you're
maybe Broadway has to evolve or die.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
Maybe there's a different type of theater.
Yeah, but Broadway proved during the pandemic that when Broadway closes, New York really, there's so many domino effect from the restaurants, the parking lots, the hotels, the nearby souvenir shops, everything.
Yes, it's a magnet. It's no question.
I know, I agree. Entertainment's a huge industry. We take it for granted. We don't think about that. In Dallas, we have 60 theater companies, 2 opera companies, half a dozen dance companies, 60 theater companies. And they all from mom and pop to regional theater. And, communities want that. And you're right. The restaurants want it. Everybody wants it.
It helps the whole community.
It's a good
right.
thing.
And a mayor of a city like that will go out to sell his city to companies and individuals by saying, we have a resident ballet theater, 4 art museums, a resident theater company, 2 resident, dance companies. And then the governor will go and say, well, we're cutting arts funding because the arts should support themselves. Well,
in all fairness, that same mayor will go out and tell you about all the sports teams they have too.
But they will not.
But we're talking about quality of life here. Right away, we're talking about quality of life.
Right. Well, and also you're talking about put on the working man's hat. You're also talking about people who have disposable income. So people who are living paycheck to paycheck are not going to the Dallas Opera. Right, people who are going to those things are in an.
Well, but don't you? If you really want to get in the weeds about this, everybody has disposable income.
No.
And maybe your hang on. Maybe your disposable income is you want to go to the sports bar once a week and drink a few beers with your buddies and have some chicken wings. So that's where you put your disposable income. Maybe your disposable income is, I don't know, you want to go to the movies every week. I realize that there are people who don't have the means to go to the opera, but it's all about choices, and we do make choices. Maybe our disposable income goes into our hobby of fly fishing or bowling, and we put our money there.
Right. Well, there's also been exceptions where, like I was at the Covent Garden Opera in London, and they had a huge screen outside and free, Anybody that wanted to sit there and watch this opera, it was being broadcast outside.
Broadway's not going to do that. But, they do discounted tickets for schools for underprivileged children. There are philanthropic, entities to all in the arts, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, there's just a spectrum of cost, right? The cost, maybe that person is going for chicken wings and a movie because that's really all they can afford. Right? Because going to the opera is a different situation. It's what you're going to wear, how you're going to get there, how much it's going to cost to park, how much is the ticket. It's not really an even playing field. Even if I would accept Steve's argument that everybody has some choices to make and a certain amount of disposable income, I would argue that not everybody does. That there are a lot of people in this country that don't have access, and even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
Well, I say it's a level playing field because you go down to, we have 60 theaters in town. Top ticket here is about $600. Bottom ticket is about $10. So you don't have to go to the $600 theater. You might go to the $10 theater that seats 35 people and have a very good time.
Right.
So that there is support out there on all levels. I really like the idea of the outdoor screen at the opera. It doesn't seem like that would take much for people to do.
No, it's a way to build an audience. It's the way to build the culture and a way to build interest in the work.
What was nice at the Covent Garden one was that there was a balcony that came out over the square where the screen was. And at one point, the cast actually came out and took a bow.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. You could do it for free. You could do it for $5. You could do a lot of things.
We have a great outdoor theater company in the summer that's actually quite brilliant.
Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss not even a second of our Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the Snoot Group with a legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Gainesville, Las Vegas, St. Bart's, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when maybe David will be back and we'll serve up more shenanigans and our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
We'll see you all again next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Adios, everyone.